Hey, how's everyone doing? And welcome back into the SFS channel. Today I'm going to be doing an updated top 12 wide receiver rankings list as we had some bombshell news coming out of Ian Rappaport and Adam Schefter yesterday. Aaron Rodgers is now expected to be reporting to training camp for the Green Bay Packers, which means that we are going to have one of our star wide receivers with his top quarterback option back in the fold in this situation here. So I've changed a lot of things around here. We've also had a Michael Thomas injury, which bumps him out of my top 12 rankings for draft season here because he's going to be missing 12 to 16 weeks post that surgery that he had back in June. So obviously he's progressing through things now, but he's not expected to be ready to go week one. So we might even not see him till late September, early October. So obviously that impacts things here. So make sure before we get started in today's video, head down, give us a like so other people can find my content and help build this fantasy community with us. Without further ado, let's hit that intro and get right into my top 12 wideouts. Alrighty, here we go. So we've got a new face in the top 12 this time around. This was formerly Terry McLaurin, who we'll see later on in today's video. He obviously rises up because, like I talked about in the intro, Michael Thomas is no longer viably or arguably a top 12 fantasy wide receiver on draft day. Can he produce those numbers once he comes into the lineup? Absolutely. He is by far, without a doubt, no questions asked, the top wide receiver on that Saints roster. Adam Trautman might be the best pass-catching threat outside of Alvin Kamara until that day comes. But with MT off the field, there's a lot of question marks there, and losing that much time, potentially a month of production out of him, just doesn't justify us investing that level of draft capital into him. So on to Amari Cooper now here. So he is now a top 12 wide receiver in my book. Tomorrow I've got a video coming out, so if you're new around here, make sure to subscribe to the channel, turn the bell on so you're notified right when it goes live. I'm talking CeeDee Lamb versus Amari Cooper and breaking down this whole Cowboys offensive situation between these two elite pass-catching threats. But nonetheless, as you can see here, he is my number 12 overall receiver. You give him Dak Prescott back, the ability to stretch the field. They had some ugly quarterback play last season. Andy Dalton was getting murdered back there when it was his time. He's certainly not a above-average starting quarterback in the National Football League, but his offensive line did him no help, no favors, so he was rushed. His passes were wildly inaccurate. It was a tough season for him. We had Garrett Gilbert starting games for this team, Ben DiNucci. It was overall such a rocky situation, but still, Amari Cooper had nearly 1,200 yards receiving, 5 touchdowns, and 130 targets. So a very good year for Cooper despite all the things that we have to consider into his fantasy situation last season. I think he steps up here, has a better group around him this season, and hopefully the injury bug stays out of Dallas because he's been pretty much a Philadelphia Eagle killer since he's arrived there in Dallas. He's been insane against those guys, and he's just one of the more exciting players to watch down there for America's team, or not America's team, depending on which NFL franchise you like. I personally like to pick on the Cowboys too, but for this video, we'll at least give them the respect as they're going to be on Hard Knocks, and that should be pretty fun to watch. But here at that number 11 wide receiver spot, I've got Terry McLaurin, as I talked about, bumping up just one unit here. It's just a factor of Michael Thomas. Nothing happened with the Washington football team from the last time I made this video, just over a month ago, to make me want to elevate McLaurin in my rankings list, but at the end of the day, Fitzmagic, you talk about the ceiling he brings to the table for this team. I don't think they had that last year. They were missing it for sure. Alex Smith, Taylor Heineke, Kyle Allen started some games for this team last year. Terry McLaurin's got a great ceiling because of his explosive play and his ability to stretch the field, but Fitzmagic, when he gets in the zone, is going to do some monster things for him. So maybe we see some more inconsistencies out of McLaurin this year just because of the fact that Fitzmagic is all over the map with how he produces on a week-to-week basis, but when he's on, and that's going to trickle down and impact Terry McLaurin and the rest of that receiving core. So I'm a big fan of Terry as he's going in about the third round of drafts right now. Allen Robinson, I haven't said enough good things about A-Rob this offseason. Well, if you've been around here on the channel, you've probably heard me say this too many times, but flat out one of the most consistent players in fantasy football. His numbers last season were very, very impressive, but according to SFS's consistency ratings, he just missed his floor barely in a couple of contests, which makes his floor consistency rating look a little bit less advantageous than it actually is. But trust me, if we had the time to make a standard deviation rating for how close he was to actually meeting those floors on a week-to-week basis, A-Rob is off the charts, back-to-back 150 target seasons. He's coming into a career year here where he's got not only a contract season coming up, but I think he's got the best quarterback play with the two quarterbacks that he might see throwing him the football this year. It's really sad, but Andy Dalton might just be the best starting quarterback Allen Robinson has had in his NFL career, and Justin Fields absolutely will be when he takes the field. So poor A-Rob's been dealing with Blake Bortles, Mitch Trubisky, Nick Foles the whole time here, but things are trending up for Robinson. If he can see some more plays downfield, some more explosive action, he's a contested catch magician. There's a lot of things that can go right for him and the Bears this season. Justin Jefferson up here at this next spot, the number 9 overall position. You talk about a rookie player. He looked like one of the best seasoned vets in the league last year. You see it there, finished as the wide receiver 7, only 7 receiving touchdowns, but he had 1,400 yards and 14 starts last season. So you don't see that all the time with rookie players. This is an offense that wants to run the ball first. They have Adam Thielen there, which is partially the reason that he's not higher up on this list, although I do think he'll see improvements in that touchdown department and whatnot. But at the end of the day, Jefferson's getting more targets than Thielen. He's getting more run after catch. And he just looks like the overall better player. I think that the sky's the limit for him moving forward here. But due to the fact that this isn't a super pass-happy offense, there is a chance we see some regression in the yardage department. So I've got him down here a little bit lower than I think he can finish overall. But still a great pick and a great player for all fantasy teams. Keenan Allen is my wide receiver 8 for this fantasy season. This one's plain and simple, 136 or more targets in the last 4 straight fantasy seasons. That is ridiculous. You don't talk about players who have that type of target ceiling on a year-to-year basis that often, and he's doing it with different quarterbacks. He had Phillip Rivers for part of that time. He had Tyrod Taylor for a game last year, and then Justin Herbert, who now obviously looks like one of the best up-and-coming QBs in the league. You can't go wrong with him. So the touchdown ceiling might not be that amazing, but he's one of the best players in terms of yards per route run. Super efficient, gets open at will because he's just such an elusive route runner and is just so crisp and refined with those routes. Again, not an athletic freak, not a guy that's going to go out and dominate corners in the red zone, but a guy who can find the space he needs to score some very valuable touchdowns to his fantasy football production. A.J. Brown is in here at my wide receiver 7. He only knocks ahead of a Keenan Allen type player because I think the upside is just a little bit better. The floor has been drawn backwards in terms of what it was expected to be immediately this offseason with the Corey Davis and Jonnu Smith departures. But if you haven't heard it by now, let me be the first to tell you, welcome Julio Jones to the Tennessee Titans offensive situation. The big 3 in Tennessee is pretty ridiculous now with A.J. Brown, Julio, and Derrick Henry. And I think that we'd be foolish not to consider Julio Jones as a threat to A.J. Brown's target share, which was a significant part of this offense last season, although the Titans don't pass the ball all that much. So while A.J. Brown might be one of the best wide receivers in the National Football League, they don't take advantage of him as much as they could if they were to throw the football more. So he's going to be crazy efficient. He's going to produce in the red zone, score touchdowns. But again, he was like my wide receiver 3 heading into this year. But as we've progressed through the offseason, the floor has reduced itself, so he has fallen down my rankings as a result, and now he's back here at this number 7 spot. And just ahead of him here, we're obviously, if you haven't figured this out, we're going in descending order to start off the video. DK Metcalf is my wide receiver 6 right now. Again, same situation as an A.J. Brown. He's got an elite player opposite of him, and I actually think that Tyler Lockett helps DK Metcalf in some regards, but I think DK Metcalf probably has a better positive impact on Tyler Lockett than the other way around because teams are not lining up and double covering Tyler Lockett. They're looking at this big, scary dude, DK Metcalf, and making sure they can do everything possible to slow him down in the red zone. They're not able to do that, though. This is the closest thing we've seen since Megatron. I'm not going to say he is Megatron. I'm not going to say that he's on the heels nipping away at Calvin Johnson's ceiling or potential production, but Russ Wilson and DK Metcalf is an elite combo. We've got back-to-back Ole Miss players who came out of the same draft class, both second-round picks. These two guys are freaks of nature, DK Metcalf and A.J. Brown. So he'll have another big year. He entering year 3 is probably going to be even better than he was a season ago. Probably, I would assume we'll see a larger target share this season. although Tyler Lockett will still get his due, nonetheless, you can't go wrong with DK Metcalf on draft day. Just try not to pick him too early as it relates to his overall value this season. Calvin Ridley moves in here at my number 5 draft spot for the 2021 fantasy season. Look, he's a bona fide wide receiver 1 at this point in his career. He proved that last season when he played 6, because Ridley only started 15 games. Without Julio Jones on the field, he still had 143 targets. Imagine what would have happened if he played that extra game. We're talking 150 plus targets if he plays that 16th game on the schedule. So he showed us he can get the job done, finish as the wide receiver 4 last season. The team brings in Kyle Pitts this offseason at the number 4 pick in the draft, but I don't think, I've said this all offseason long, I don't think Kyle Pitts will hit day 1. He's got a great ceiling. He will eventually reach that status of being a generational talent, but tight end is such a tricky spot. It's going to take some time to get used to things, and Calvin Ridley is going to be right up there near the top of the crop for receivers this year if he can stay healthy. DeAndre Hopkins is my wide receiver 4 right now. He actually bunny hopped Calvin Ridley in my rankings here as of the last update I just did. Plain and simple, it comes down to the fact that although D-Hop did say some very publicized things in a tweet recently regarding his status in the NFL after the new COVID policy, I don't think that we should read too much into that until we hear something significantly new. I wouldn't expect DeAndre Hopkins to step away from the National Football League and retire, but D-Hop saw 160 targets in his first year with Kyler Murray with basically no offseason to prepare. He's going to come in next season and do great things. Entering his age 29 year, this dude's a stud, and like I said, 160 in your first year with a new young quarterback, he could potentially expand upon that, despite the fact that the team has added other free agent and draft pick options at the wideout group. So, D-Hop might be one of the best wide receivers in the National Football League at producing against elite cornerback play as well. We see him produce relatively solid numbers or better numbers than other players typically do against your tough matchups in those games against Stephon Gilmore's of the world, Jalen Ramsey, who he has to see twice a year. He seems to always at least put up borderline starting level numbers against him. Even if he can't produce an elite yardage total, he seems to find the end zone enough times to make it worth the start. So, you know what? That division is really tough. It looks like on paper that DeAndre Hopkins has some really tough games to play each and every single year when you've got San Francisco and the Rams on your schedule twice, but he seems to overcome it. So until he shows us he can't do that anymore, I'm still on the D-Hop wagon and more than willing to draft one of the most complete players in the game. At number 2, this is number 3. I have updated this a little bit here. Tyreek Hill moves down to this spot for the simple fact that I think we see some touchdown regression from him. I think that being a player who is as explosive as Hill is, he's got all the upside in the world. He can score in a flash. It only takes one play for him, but you're talking about a guy who sees less targets than another player on his team, that being Travis Kelce, who, in my opinion, is Patrick Mahomes. And the numbers will show you, is Patrick Mahomes' safety blanket and the guy he looks to on the most occasions. Travis Kelce has 25% of the Chiefs' offensive target share, as opposed to 23% for Tyreek Hill. So it's not like it's a night and day difference. It's not like Travis Kelce is being chucked the ball way more than Tyreek Hill is. But at the end of the day, he's not the number 1 option on his own team. So yes, Travis Kelce is in his 30s now, but I don't think he'll start regressing very soon here. The tight end position usually seems to be very durable because those are big players. And unless you're like Gronkowski, who's getting literally targeted at the later stages of his career with the Pats when he was basically unstoppable, and you see all these injuries rack up, that's when I'd start being concerned, but that hasn't been the case with Travis Kelce. So nonetheless, not a tight ends video. We're not going to talk about that anymore, but plain and simple here, I think that touchdown regression is in play for Tyreek. He had 15 last season, a 16th that should have been counted into his fantasy equation here, but that wasn't because the Chiefs did not throw the challenge flag. So besides the point, if you don't know what I'm talking about there, go look up that play from last season. But here we go, moving into the number 2 wide receiver spot. I've bumped Stephon Diggs up into this category. Again, this comes down to the plain and simple fact that touchdowns are such a sporadic statistical category for players between a year-to-year basis in fantasy football, where I see Tyreek Hill regressing in the touchdown department and maybe staying very similar on the yardage category. I think Diggs can replicate his yardage from last season and maybe improve upon the amount of touchdowns he scored. Only 7 TDs, so less than half of what Tyreek Hill saw last year. There's a lot more room for improvement than there is for a Tyreek Hill at this spot. So Diggs led the league in targets last year, 168 of them with Josh Allen in year one. Again, no offseason. I'm not saying I think he'll improve or increase that target share, but I do think it'll stay pretty dang similar and give him the opportunity to put up those elite fantasy numbers. And then at number 1 here, Davante Adams retakes the throne of the wide receiver 1 position. Look, I just talked about last week, Tyreek Hill was on my Friday fades list as a player we need to stop drafting at his current ADP, because him and Davante Adams basically flipped draft positions when nothing changed in Tyreek Hill's fantasy situation. The player who was seeing changes in his fantasy outlook was Davante Adams. But instead of just dropping Adams, Tyreek Hill is moving up boards and being picked earlier as the first wideout off the board. So I said, come on, we got to stop doing that. Like, I understand that Davante Adams at the time was no longer the wide receiver 1, but that doesn't mean we should start picking another player at the position earlier just because the competition has leveled out just a bit, if you know what I'm saying. Because I think that, you see now I have Stefon Diggs ranked higher than Tyreek Hill. That just seemed like a foolish decision to me personally, when I like the situation of others very, very similar to that of Hill. And notably, a Calvin Ridley and a DeAndre Hopkins, who are right behind Tyreek. I don't think it's all that different in the terms of the upside we can see in the floor on a week-to-week basis. So Davante here, it's plain and simple. Aaron Rodgers is returning to the Green Bay Packers, or at least expected to do that as of now. The Packers and him have seemingly worked out their differences for now. There's the opportunity for not only Adams to walk in a contract year this coming season, or this coming off season rather, but Rodgers to do the same. They're going to void the 2023 season off of his contract, and we'll see where things go from here after the 2021 year. But all that matters for fantasy football is right now, Aaron, Davante look like they're both going to be present and healthy for training camp here. And as we move towards week 1, the player who saw the highest target share of any player by a mile at his position, Davante Adams, with 34% of the Packers' offensive targets, is moving back up into this spot because he's got his QB1 back and won't be playing with Jordan Love at the moment. That's what it looks like here for this fantasy season. So that'll do it for today's video. I will see you guys in the outro. All right, those were my top 12 wide receiver rankings in late July for the 2021 fantasy football season. Let me know down in the comment section below, which spots on the board did you disagree with here? Maybe towards the back end of the list or the top of the list, you've got some differing opinions, because I think Amari Cooper was a guy I thought long and hard about putting in here, but there's a lot of names who could very easily be worthy of that number 12 spot. Maybe you like a Diggs more than an Adams. Maybe you still like Tyreek Hill more than Adams at the top of the board. So I'd love to hear it. Let me know down in the comment section below. As always, I plug this every video. If you want to jump into the SFS community Discord and get access to some subscriber mock drafts that I do 2 of every single week, that is completely free and available for you down in the description of today's and every video. So be sure to click that up, join that, and get involved. Join the conversation starting in August. I'll be doing some weekly and maybe at times even daily giveaways for my SFS Draft Guide collection in there. So you want to be a part of that. You want to be a part of this SFS community, and we want to be helping you guys be the best fantasy players you can be during this fantasy season, and obviously win those leagues at the end of the year. So thank you all so much again for watching. Be sure to subscribe if you're new around here, and I'll see you all next time. Peace out.